welcome. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. It was a very fine meal. I want to congratulate the folks here at Fed Hall for that. I'd like to introduce a few special guests and also our sponsors before we bring up the presenters. Now, you're all very, very important people. I'd like to introduce you all individually, but I can't. So I'm just going to pick a few and introduce them. At our head table, we're very excited about having basically three of our very prominent local politicians and promoters of the area. We have from the City of Waterloo, Mayor Joan McKinnon. Joan? From the City of Kitchener, Carl Zaire. Mayor Carl Zaire. And Ken Sealing, the Chair of the Region of Waterloo. Ken. And we're also very excited about having three generations of presidents of the University of Waterloo at that table. And I'd like to just Jim Downey will have a chance to come on up and actually will be introducing our guest speaker. But if I could just introduce Dr. Doug Wright. Jim Downey. If you could just stand up, Jim, you'll see again. And of course, David Johnston will be properly introduced shortly. One other person who I'd like to introduce or just recognize is an important person to this, as we all are, to this community. But Jim Beingester has joined us. He is the chair of the New Economic Development Corporation of the CTT. Jim? And of course, all the rest of you. Why don't you give yourself a hand? Let's do it. Come on. Yeah. These events are always very, very important, and certainly can't be done without the help of the sponsors that we have for these events. So I'd like to recognize the sponsors who have generously provided money and support to us. First of all, the BDC, we're one sponsor. CTAN with Lindsay Warden, and Lindsay will be up here shortly to introduce one of our speakers. Gowlings, the law firm who has been here since the beginning of Communitech and a major supporter. McCarter, Grespin, Robson, and Bainan, who are also original founding members of Communitech. The Infranet Project, and Shirley Fenton of Infranet, and Don Cowan, but Shirley, who has done a marvelous job both for Infranet and for pulling this whole organization together from the University of Waterloo's point of view. And finally, The Record, who are our major media sponsor, who have provided us with all of the support in the media. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your sponsors. Please welcome them. We have an opportunity, that's the end of it for sort of the housekeeping and announcements, but we do have an opportunity at these new events to feature one of the startup or new companies, which is what we're all about here in technology. So to introduce the individual who's going to talk about his company, I'd like to bring up Lindsay Warden, our CTAN president. Thank you.
As many of you are aware, we are providing 10 minutes to a CTAN client to make a presentation and make you all more aware of what they're doing here in Waterloo or Kitchener, Cambridge or Guelph. So today our CTAN presenter is Arise Technologies Corporation. Arise is a Waterloo company that is developing a standardized solar energy system for homes. And I'm not going to take up any more of Ian's 10 minutes, so it's my great pleasure to introduce you to the President and CEO of Arise Technologies, Ian McClellan.
Thank you, Lindsay. In the next 10 minutes, I'd like to briefly share our vision about solar energy. At Arise Technologies, we believe that we're at the brink of seeing a whole huge market explode for appropriate, renewable, intelligent, sustainable energy. It's interesting that the sun provides over 10,000 times the amount of energy that all of us use on this planet. And we think that if we can figure out a way to economically harvest that energy, that is not only both compelling but also elegant. Today I'm going to share briefly with you some of the new developments in the field of solar energy and what we are planning to do in our company to capitalize on this historic opportunity. This next, excuse me, can people hear this? Okay. This picture here is an example of one of the best examples I know of utilizing the solar energy. The roof of this home contributes the majority of the energy for the home. It's architecturally integrated with the building, and it generates the majority of the energy. Part of the roof contains what is known as grid-connected photovoltaics. What we're doing here is taking the solar energy and directly converting it into electricity. The electricity is then fed directly into the utility grid. What happens if the home is not consuming all of that energy? As the electricity is fed into the grid, the electrical meter will run backwards. The interesting thing is 99% of all electrical meters run backwards, and it's a very simple thing to do. What happens at night is the electricity then comes back from the grid and the meter runs forward. This concept is known as net metering. Also on this house is a solar thermal array that generates and captures from the sun the heat energy for the house, and that's used for domestic hot water, space heating in the winter, and pool heating and hot tubs in the summertime. What we're working at Arise is to make this technology more cost effective, and our mission is to bring solar energy mainstream. Some of the new things that we're working on is we have developed a grid-connected inverter. There's a unit in the back if you want to learn more. And a month ago, we installed this at the Courtright Centre just north of Toronto. Here we are generating electricity from the sun and feeding it back into the grid here in Ontario. And this was done with Ontario Hydro. This technology is being used in many places throughout the world. To give you an idea of how things are evolving, in 1993, there were 10 demonstration projects in Japan. Last year, they installed 9,600 homes. They've installed thousands of homes throughout Europe and the United States. And the goal in the United States, President Clinton's announcement at the United Nations about a year and a half ago, is to deploy solar energy on 1 million roofs by the year 2010. The European Union has also matched this ambitious goal. This was part of the Americans' commitment going into the Kyoto discussions on climate change. In Canada, 82% of the energy used in homes is used to heat things, hot water, space heating, pools, and whatever. And based upon the foundation that has been of the science that's been developed here at the University of Waterloo over the last 25 years under the leadership of Professor Terry Hollins in the Solar Lab, they've published over 150 papers in this area. What we've done is, based upon this foundation, we've developed a new solar thermal collector that we believe we're well underway to achieve our goal of cutting the cost in half and improving system reliability. In our system, both the photovoltaics and the solar thermal are building integrated in a very architecturally pleasing manner. We've also licensed some technology from Hewlett-Packard to control these systems, and eventually we'll have internet connection so homeowners will be able to reduce their energy costs and to make their buildings more environmentally responsible by using the internet and, in fact, plugging into smart communities. The other interesting thing is that the costs are coming down. The first grid-connected home built in 1980, the photovoltaic system cost more than the house. We've seen a dramatic reduction in costs, and we believe we're now within striking distance of this technology being cost-effective, not only here in Canada, but elsewhere in the world. One of the utility deregulation is also going to play what I think is the most significant role in making solar energy practical. And the reason for this is, in a regulated environment similar to the telephone industry, we've had a situation where long-distance telephone was subsidizing local phone service. Well, the same thing has been happening with utilities. Their cost for peak energy is actually greater than what we pay here in Waterloo, and their off-peak costs are much lower. So in a deregulated environment, we're going to see the true costs come through. In fact, at the wholesale basis, as a result of Bill 35, next year we will have hourly utility rates at the wholesale level. And so what we do with our system is we actually generate excess energy during peak periods, and we consume energy during off-peak periods, which basically gives the homeowner a way to buy low and sell high. We're also seeing a renewed interest in environmental concerns. Unfortunately, Kitchener-Waterloo got the distinction of being the smog capital of Ontario last year. And we're seeing, with the closure of some of the nuclear power plants, a dramatic increase of coal-fired electricity. We did an estimate on my home that we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 54 metric tons by deploying this system. So what we're seeing is that there's a significant environmental benefit, but the question that we've been asking in our company is, what do the customers think? And what we're seeing is that there's a renewed interest in the environment by customers, and several market surveys, in fact one here done by a student in conjunction with the Waterloo North Hydro, show that even here in Waterloo, the majority of people are willing to pay a small premium for environmentally friendly energy. So in terms of meeting our cost targets, we don't have to beat conventional fuels, we just have to get close. So we have this huge market opportunity. Interesting, according to the International Energy Agency, approximately 4% of our gross domestic product is spent on energy, but 15 to 20% of our investment dollars is in energy. Over the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to invest between $20 and $30 trillion on this planet on new energy sources. Today, solar energy is a $1 billion market, but it's fast underway to becoming a very, very large market. So with this huge opportunity, what have we done? I'd like to share briefly a couple of things. First of all, we've put together an excellent team. Part of my background before founding Arise is I spent 6 years running a venture capital company. So I have a little bit of experience in building teams, and I like to publicly say that this is the best team that I've ever had the privilege of working with. We have people that have come from some really good companies such as Hewlett-Packard, General Electric, Motorola, Oracle, Union Gas, that have all joined our team. And they come with professional designations. We have a CA and PEng and people with some advanced degrees such as MBAs and Masters in Electrical Engineering. And we also have a really great team of engineers who happen to all come from the University of Waterloo, but they're very motivated to what we're doing. We've also been able to raise some money. We're well underway with our third round of funding, and we've made some good progress there. We've developed and licensed some proprietary technology with some patents pending and licensed technology from Hewlett-Packard, Stat Power, and others. We've developed some key relationships with utilities, governments, industry partners, and universities. We're located in the back of the Innovation Center. In fact, the University of Waterloo is our landlord. Because of the close proximity, we've been able to develop great relationships with many departments. The technology that we're working on is extremely multidisciplinary. I've had discussions with people in mechanical engineering, electrical, in the systems engineering area, architectural school, environmental studies, material science, and I've even chatted with an economics professor. We've got to make sure the economics works. We've developed a focused marketing plan. We have our marketing manager who's a former vice president of marketing with Union Gas. He knows a little bit about the energy business. And we're targeting initially the new higher-end home market. We think that's where solar will happen first. But this technology will become very, very pervasive in the coming years. We've developed our first full-scale prototype, which we plan to be building this summer. And we've also developed a distribution business to help with cash flow and to instill in our company very early the importance of customer satisfaction. What I'd like to do is just, if you're interested in what you can do, first of all, if you're planning to build a home in the next 12 to 18 months, we'd like you to consider an Arise Solar Sense home for the millennium. We do take Visa and MasterCard. Also, we're always looking for investors. We can talk about that offline. And also, because we're very multidisciplinary, we're continuing to look for people to get involved with the company, organizations, joint ventures, or whatever. Well, I have so much more I could share with you about solar energy. And what I like to do is to say thank you and coming to a roof near your solar energy. Thank you.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, to commend Ian on that brilliant presentation and promotion of Arise, and to say on behalf of the landlord how much we appreciate the endorsement. Can I suggest, if anyone is feeling uncomfortable because they're sitting with their back or side to the podium, that you feel free to shift your chairs so that you can be comfortable during David's speech. The two ladies were sitting in the living room waiting for their hostess, who was slightly delayed. The daughter of the family was with them on the theory that she would keep the visitors occupied during the wait. The child was perhaps 6 years old and not very attractive. She was also not very sociable, maintaining a deep silence as the two women peered doubtfully at her. Finally, one of them muttered to the other, "Not very P-R-E-T-T-Y, I fear," carefully spelling out the word, whereupon the child piped up and said, "No, but awfully S-M-A-R-T." Now, it's interesting how the word smart, which used to be exclusively applied to people, and only some people at that, has recently become attached to inanimate objects, such as automobiles, offices, classrooms, and new communities. It reflects, of course, a wish to acknowledge the networks of electronic and cybernetic intelligence that now envelop us. What we have here today is an awfully S-M-A-R-T person talking about smart communities. He will explain presently what is meant by smart communities. I will explain now what I mean by a smart person. David Johnston completed university studies at Harvard, Cambridge, and Queen's universities, which, when you think about it, is really showing off. But the fellow can't help it. All his life he's been an overachiever. Outstanding student athlete, Dean of Law at Western at 33, Principal of McGill at 38, Head of the National Association of Canadian Universities, moderator of a high-powered television program, holder of 11 honorary degrees, companion of the Order of Canada. It goes on and on. Very boring. But he hasn't accomplished all this and more just by being smart. There are lots of awfully smart people in the world. A significant percentage of them underachieve. It's the awfully W-I-S-E ones who make a difference. And it is his wisdom, more than anything else, that made David Johnston an outstanding academic leader in Canada for 15 years. And it is for his wisdom that organizations, corporations, and governments have turned to him so often in recent years for advice and leadership. Not surprisingly, therefore, when the federal government wanted advice on smart communities and how to bring them about, it asked David to chair the Blue Ribbon panel. And it is the work of that panel which David will discuss this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the University of Waterloo's awfully smart and awfully wise President-Designate, David Johnston.
Thank you very much, Jim. Having heard you speak about smart people, I feel a lot more comfortable speaking about smart communities. At our table, I was just remarking that my children, and I have 5 daughters, therefore I am the most improved man in the world, because each morning 6 women get up and say, "How do we improve, Dad, today?" My children from time to time say, "Okay, Dad, tell us all you know. Time's up." I want to thank Jim Downey here on this wonderful campus for his graciousness and to say how honored I am to succeed Jim as president of the University of Waterloo. In our group of university presidents, we regard Jim as a kind of a triple W threat: Waterloo, wisdom, and wit. And he has all 3 in superb measure. He has a 4th W as well, and that's a wicked serve in tennis that I've experienced at the wrong end, and it still has me trembling. Thank you, Jim. Madam Mayor, honored guests, representatives of business and academic communities, ladies and gentlemen, may I say, first of all, thank you for welcoming my wife and myself to your community, this remarkable community, and thank you for giving me the chance to do this job. It's simply superb. We're very excited, and I can't tell you how much my wife Sharon and I look forward to our associations with you. I want to thank Vince Chiarelli and all of the people at Communitech for providing this opportunity, the first occasion I've had to address members of the university community and the broader community for hosting this wonderful event. I want to say to Ian, with respect to the activities of Arise, Ian, there is one more important promotional item you can put on the slide. A year and a half ago in Montreal, we had the worst ice storm in history. Our own home was without electricity for 6 days, the university for about 4 days. We moved, my wife and I, with our 2 dogs, to our cottage at the north end of Lac Tremblant, where we have solar electricity. And we were perfectly comfortable, and I got more work done in 5 days there than I do in 50 days in the office. So please add that to solar electricity. I want to begin with a story that may be apocryphal, but it apparently is taken from a transcript of a ham radio operator off the coast of Jim's wonderful part of the world, Newfoundland. And it goes this way. Voice 1, attention, you are proceeding towards a collision. Recommend you alter course 45 degrees northwest. Voice 2, attention, you are proceeding towards a collision. Recommend you alter course 45 degrees southeast. Voice 1, caution. In 2.5 minutes, you will collide. Recommend you change course now. Voice 2, caution. In less than 2 minutes, you will collide. Recommend you change course now. Voice 1, I am the USS Eisenhower, aircraft carrier of the United States Navy. Change course now. Voice 2, I'm a lighthouse, your move. The point of that story is that in this marvelous age of technology, where we have so many tools at hand, it is the wisdom and the wit and the thoughtfulness of people and how we use those tools which will determine the kind of society we are. And if I say nothing more today, that is the message I'd like to leave you with. I'd also like to celebrate people and their achievements, because what is reflected in this room and in the aspirations for our community, we look to champions, we look to achievers, and I want to recognize several now. K-Ping Yi was a member of the 1994 World Championship UW team that astounded the world by capturing the prestigious ACM Collegiate Computer Programming Competition title. It was a magnificent win, and it has just been repeated by this year's Waterloo team. Just last month, Waterloo's 1999 edition beat the world's best universities and colleges in the ACM, which means Association for Computer Machinery, computing competition held last month in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. The team, David Kennedy, Andres Lotek, Vit Trung Liu, and alternate Donnie Chung, coached by Professor Gordon Carmack, are here, or a number of them are here today, and would they please stand right now? They're right over here. We celebrate individual champions, and we celebrate the capacity of this community here in Waterloo to take on the best in the world and to demonstrate levels of competence that are quite breathtaking. This team scaled the heights in a marathon programming exhibition to finish first, followed by the University of Freiburg in Germany, St. Petersburg in Russia, Bucharest University in Romania, Duke University in the United States, and rounding out the top 10 were California Polytechnic, University of California at Berkeley. I have a little trouble with this next one because there's a very large spot in my heart for Harvard, St. Petersburg State University, and National Taiwan University. In the top 20, Tsinghua University in China, Beijing University, the premier university in China, Cornell University, and the Korean Institute of Science and Technology. This is an instructive illustration for all of us today, especially those of you in the high-tech communication sector, because it illustrates how the competition we all face comes from all over the world. And not just the powerhouse of the United States, the Harvards, the Berkeleys, and the MITs, but the Russias, the Romanias, the Germanys, the Netherlands, Taiwan, Korea, China. There are no borders for the world's best brains or its commerce. The tool, a computer, sits on almost every desk in offices and homes and schools and hospitals. It is already handheld, uplinking to satellites soaring around our globe in near space. 150 years ago, it took days to travel across this county by Conestoga wagon. Today we can be around the world and back in a millisecond. In fact, the Lanark County Smart Community Network has a wonderful little phrase. That's the county just south of Ottawa in cottage country. They say, 10 minutes from the cottage, 10 seconds from Tokyo. My talk today, as advertised, is about the smart community and a bit more. It's about how we harness the information tools we are developing so rapidly in a time of great change. We've had other periods of change. What is different about today is the pace of that change. Just one little example from neuroscience. 90% of what we know about the human brain we've learned in the last 15 years. Just put that into so many different categories and we see how rapid the change is. We have the challenge to make better lives for our children, a better country, a better society. And as I see it, our challenge is how to harness these powerful tools to form a triangle with each side and each corner reinforcing the other, increase wealth, strengthen social or civic cohesiveness while enhancing political liberty, or in other words, building a more civic society. St. Augustine, in that great book, The City of God, once asked the question, if you wish to judge the quality of a city or a community, look to see what it cherishes. If you wish to judge the quality of a city, look to see what it cherishes. John Gardner once posed the question, can we have equality of opportunity and excellence too? Well, in my judgment, and I am a newcomer, although I'm already a little biased, this community has demonstrated that we can have equality of opportunity and excellence too, that those two concepts need not compete, but mutually reinforce, and that it is that combination of equality of opportunity and excellence too that is cherished in this community of ours. To be here today at this great university is a rare and magnificent privilege in this progressive community, and as a very early citizen, let me hazard just a few observations. The people and the businesses of Waterloo region today do play a leading role in defining the economic and social well-being of the province and the country. And in many ways, how we go, so goes the rest of the country. What we do will have a very important effect on how competitive and how civic our society is as we look over the next 10, 20, 30 years. There's historical precedent for this. This community has, in my judgment, a remarkable record of achievement and pioneering spirit, far outstripping its relatively small size. I remember this community as a boy growing up in Sault Ste. Marie with the Kitchener-Waterloo Dutchmen, the 1956 competitors in the Olympics at Cortina in Italy, and have followed it with admiration since. Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, the surrounding towns have always been industrious, innovative, inventive places. Entrepreneurship, self-reliance flourish here. And the community has a history of being willing to use its wit, or to use that term that Jim introduced so well, smarts. The original settlers drained the swamps and leveled the sandhills in which the first city was built. They built mills and shops, tanneries, factories in what was then called Berlin. The region was settled by Mennonite farmers in the early 1800s, people who were self-sufficient, independent, freedom-loving, hard-working, God-fearing. As well, along came the industrious Scots to neighboring towns of Ayr and Galt. That ethnic nature carried on through the generations with new influxes, still primarily German, settling in the area. But Kitchener and its eventual twin Waterloo were diverse places of commerce, not dominated by single industries such as a Winnipeg with its Hudson's Bay, or some northern towns, and I come from one, with their mines and logging. Here, manufacturing diversity was a hallmark. By the 1870s, local businesses, shoes, furniture, clothing, buttons, were sending sales representatives out across the nation. Unlike its neighbors on the Grand River to the south, Berlin had little water to harness, so local leaders quickly embraced steam engines to power commercial and industrial enterprise. But it was a community built on more than ingenuity. It was ingenuity plus civility. There is a wide streak of tolerance that cuts across this community. To this day, the area has a history of allowing, encouraging people to be themselves. There is also a character strength of understatement and modesty. People here traditionally have not flaunted their wealth and affluence. There has always been a strong undercurrent of social responsibility to those of lesser means. Also, perhaps related to the former, this has always been a strong church-going community where religious prejudice was never a real factor. It is home to this day to a wide number of denominations and great concentration of groups that help immigrants of all ethnic backgrounds and faiths. In Saint-Exupéry's book, Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, there is a wonderful statement that applies so much to what I've just said and is such an important opportunity and theme for our nation, Canada. It goes this way: I am different from you, but I do not diminish you, I enrichen you. So you see, in its own way, this area has a history of supporting the growth and the reinforcement of that triangle: wealth creation, social cohesiveness, political liberty that I spoke of a few minutes ago. Now let's fast forward to the founding of a university. Just shortly after you were doing that in the 50s, I was a student on a Rotary Foundation fellowship in the United Kingdom, and one of the great benefits of a Rotary fellowship is that one has an opportunity to go to local Rotary clubs and speak a little bit about one's country and one's experience. And I used to sing a song, Jim. It was a song from Newfoundland, the chorus of which went, and I won't sing it here, but on another occasion, if prompted, I will. The chorus of which went this way: when I first came to this land, I was not a wealthy man, but the land was sweet and good, and I did what I could. But the land was sweet and good, and I did what I could. And that word "could" conjures up so many powerful images of what different waves of immigration have done in this country, coming with little more than the shirts in their back. Hugh MacLennan, that great Canadian novelist who was with us throughout his career at McGill, once wrote, "Canada is a nation of losers." Hugh was a Highland Scot that came with the clearances. But he didn't mean that in any pejorative sense. He meant that most people who came here had nothing by way of important physical collections. They came simply with their wit and their willingness to work hard, and have built a society which, in my judgment, has done a better job of equality of opportunity than any society in history and any comparative society in the world today. And our challenge is to ensure that we can have equality of opportunity and excellence too. If a university reflects anything of value, it is its own community. The University of Waterloo is a classic case. This sense of quiet achievement and understatement carries through to UW as well. Like the community, it has been unassuming, practical, not given to showiness and status seeing. One of my great friends at McGill was a gentleman who died at age 96, still practicing as an obstetrician, not in the sense of delivering babies, but teaching at the Cornell University Medical School. And I remember one evening, Dr. Nathanson was with us for dinner in our home, and my number 3 daughter said, "Dr. Nathanson, I've listened to you with such fascination for 3 hours. Is it possible for you to sum up your personal philosophy in just a sentence or two? And wonderful man that he was, he said, "Of course, my dear, I will try to do so for you." He said, "It comes from the prophet Micah. Seek wisdom, show mercy, love justice, or in other words, don't be a show-off." Like the early settlers, the founders of UW were men and women of enterprise and self-sufficiency. They were practical people who looked to practical solutions for their problems. Their problem was not enough technically competent engineers and technicians for local and regional business and industry. The solution? Launch a distinctive university that would provide the brain power and the technical expertise. So, the University of Waterloo was founded by local business leaders, Jerry Hagee, Ira Needles, Carl Pollack, and other community visionaries. The growth, the vision, and the leadership, again, came not from without, but from within this rather small community with its national and international outlook. Innovation was its hallmark. From the beginning, Waterloo became heavily involved in the brave new world of computing. It was unheard of then, but Waterloo encouraged undergraduates to learn as much about them as possible. Remember, in the 60s, computers were massive, expensive tools. Only the military and a few research labs had access to them. It was typical of Waterloo to break the mold, to create a new culture of learning using the computer. It was men like Bert Matthews, Doug Wright, computer science pioneers Wes Graham, Don Cowan, who were at the forefront. I think Don and Doug are certainly here today. Perhaps Wes and Bert are as well. So where does this lead us in terms of smart communities? As we enter the millennium, it's instructive to look back. I was saying to Ken on my left today that I have on my desk at the moment Will and Ariel Durant's Age of Reformation, looking particularly at the 16th century, because that period of 1500 had so many interesting analogies to our particular time today. The musical that's playing in Canada now and played in Paris for the last year from Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame has a wonderful scene from the Cathedral Notre Dame where the Archdeacon of Paris was with the Emperor of France, and he held up a book, and the book was the Bible, and said, "This will kill that," pointing to the cathedral. And what he meant was the printing press would so revolutionize the understanding of religion that humankind in those days, whose most important task was understanding of their relationship with God, could do it for themselves, would no longer need the hierarchy of priests and bishops and cardinals and popes. And from that came Gutenberg's technological revolution, Luther's social and cultural revolution, where the Bible was printed in the vernacular so people could understand it themselves. Hugo explained that as the parent revolution, a revolution that gave birth to more revolutions. Gutenberg's technological revolution, the social and cultural revolution symbolized by Luther that brought about widespread learning, the Industrial Revolution, modern liberal democracy, and so on. We live in an equivalent period today, a new parent revolution. But if we look back to that period in 1500 to try to extract lessons from it, compare the civilization of Western Europe then with that of Islam and China in 1500. Because in many respects, Islam and China were more advanced civilizations than Western Europe in 1500 at the time of Gutenberg and Luther. In terms of technology, China was using movable type at least 600 years before Western Europe, paper long before that, and gunpowder when Marco Polo arrived several hundred years earlier. In 1492, as Columbus sailed to the New World, Islam had superior military engineering, architecture, and agriculture. It had reached the ramparts of Madrid, marched well into Europe's lowlands, and banged on the gates of Jerusalem. But then the tables turned. Western Europe began a trajectory dramatically outpacing China and the world of Islam, at least in wealth creation and political liberty. Why? There's a wonderful historian, Nathan Rosenberg, who writes a book called How the West Got Rich, but rich is used in a very large sense. And he says it was flexible institutions of governance which conquered feudalism and the rise of the cities, the new cities provided the cradles of creativity, and newly liberated individuals began to question, to reason, to revise, to rebuild, and to innovate. In essence, Europe had become better at managing that important triangle of success: wealth creation, social cohesiveness, and political liberty. Let me speak briefly about three cities at and just after that time, again to extract lessons. The first, for the negative lessons, is Salamanca. I'm not sure how many of you love, as I do, the books of James Michener. I believe I've read everything that Michener has written, fiction or nonfiction. One of his lesser-known books is called Iberia. It's his account of his lifelong love affair with Spain. And in the early pages, he begins round about 1500, in fact 1492, when Isabella and Ferdinand sent Columbus to America, and said, why did Spain, which was not only at the height of its power, but was the dominant nation in Europe, fall, and fall so far so quickly? And 800 pages later, he's in the town of Salamanca, and he says, here I have found the core of the answer to the question I put on the first page. Because in 1492, when Columbus went to America from Spain, Salamanca was the jewel of European universities. The scholars of Oxford and Paris would come to Salamanca for the most important questions to be determined. The princes and dukes of Europe would seek advice from the scholars at Salamanca for their most difficult problems. But then, says Michener, something happened. The Inquisition came and had its strongest grip in Salamanca and at the university. So first, those who were Moors, Islamic people who led engineering, were expelled from the university, and hence fell what we would today call the faculties of engineering and architecture. And then those of Jewish heritage were expelled, particularly from medical school, from other parts of the university. And then as the Inquisition widened its grip, more and more people who were considered heretical were expelled from that university, so that by the 17th century, the great University of Salamanca had become little more than a finishing school for the sons of noble men. Spain turned inwards, lost tolerance, lost innovation, lost perspective. And in fact, it turns its back on Europe as it turns its back on reason and innovation. And, said Michener, that is why Spain fell. At the same time, just a few hundred miles away to the east was the town of Florence, 30,000 people, which was the cradle of the Renaissance. And there, in a period of 200 or 300 years, such innovation, such ingenuity that perhaps we've never seen in history and have never seen since. There, Dante developed the Italian language from the ancient Latin. There, Leonardo da Vinci did his wonders in painting and sculpture, in engineering and design. There, Michelangelo, in painting and sculpture, did his wonderful things. There, the Medici family became the bankers of Europe and created wealth that could sponsor and fund this great outburst of creativity. Machiavelli in political science, Savonarola in religion. The list goes on and on about Florence. And lessons to be learned about what was special about the winds blowing of the Arno River as it flowed into the sea there that created that climate of ingenuity and innovation and creativity. About 100 years later, a group of religious dissenters left England, the Pilgrims, and arrived in Boston, or more particularly, arrived at Cambridge, the city where I spent 4 glorious years of my late teens. They arrived in 1620, and in 1636, they said, we cannot depend upon the old world for learning. We must be self-reliant. We must do it ourselves. And so with John Harvard's library and a little bit of money, they created Harvard University from very, very humble beginnings. And then, about 150 or 200 years after that, the same people of Boston decided that they needed a technical or a technological university. And they created something that would complement the Harvard. It was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is no farther away from Harvard than the University of Waterloo is from Wilfrid Laurier University today. They're neighbors, they're side by each. And I suppose if we went around the world today and asked people to list the 50, the 10 best universities in the world, on that list of 10 would be Harvard and MIT, perhaps on the list of 5 would be Harvard and MIT. How did that happen? And how did the Route 128 phenomenon develop around Harvard? And how did the most magnificent hospitals and medical schools and museums and symphony orchestras happen in that little town, beginning with those Puritans in 1620? Let me suggest that there are analogies to be drawn between that wonderful experiment and what we see here in this part of Canada. So, today we face a challenge. How can we use the new tools of information technology to enhance and strengthen the synergy across the 3 corners of our triangle? How does a society find the balance of wealth creation, social cohesiveness, and political liberty? How do we use the tools of information technology to strengthen the corners of the triangle, thus making it a stronger whole? The information highway, cyberspace, the World Wide Web, whatever you care to call it, the challenge for us is, can it be harnessed for the greater good of mankind? Ironically, only a few years ago, the internet was the sole domain of the secretive US military, who developed it as a fail-safe communication network in the event of a Third World War, that is, the virtual obliteration of mankind. But something happened. It spread to academia. More particularly, it spread to graduate students in academia. And we all know what happens when secrets hit university chat lines. Grad students and researchers got hold of it to talk, communicate, research, advertise, symposia. There was no turning back. It's a wonderful example of swords being turned into plowshares. For Canadians, the challenge is to live up to our ancestors' ability to embrace new technologies. Canadians built the Canadian Pacific Railway, the Telegraph, Trans-Canada Highway, some of the earliest, most sophisticated telecommunication systems. I had the great pleasure to chair the Information Highway Advisory Council for the Government of Canada from '94 to '97. And early in one of our first sessions, we were trying to get away from that hard, awkward metaphor, the information highway, to something that was less physical, that embraced more people. In fact, we called our first report Content, Community, Challenge, Connection, because we were anxious to bring the community notion, the people notion in. At one point, we thought we would abandon the information highway and we would title our report The Next Spike, with apologies to Pierre Burton's The Last Spike, the second of his 2-volume account of the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway, because the communication network represented by the internet is as important to us, or perhaps more, than building that transcontinental highway, which was the condition of British Columbia entering Confederation, building a nation coast to coast. But it's not the last spike, it's the next spike, in the sense that we are building spike after spike after spike, achievement after achievement after achievement. Alas, we did not choose a title like that, or another one that was a very attractive one for me. It was going to be, it's the content, A, and A is a typical Canadian expression, and it's also EH for electronic highway. So we stayed with information highway because that's what we knew. The 1997 speech from the throne for the Government of Canada promised to make this nation the most connected in the world. Note the definite article. We Canadians are not usually that assertive. The most connected nation in the world by the year 2000. And under the connectedness agenda, the agenda which came from our work in the Information Highway Advisory Council, SchoolNet will connect every one of Canada's 16,500 schools and 3,400 public libraries to the internet by the middle of this year. In fact, that's now been accomplished. Apart from Singapore, that little island nation, we are the first country in the world to have every school and every public library connected to the internet. A remarkable achievement, done an expenditure of 60 to 70 million taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Clinton, in his address to Congress, aspires the United States to do that by the year 2000 at a cost of $50 billion. That's a 1/1,000 ratio to $50 million. So we have done it on about 1/1,000th of the cost in the United States, and it's accomplished. Of course, the challenge is that's 1% of the journey only. The other 99% is to get some content onto that connection, and then to turn us teachers from content providers into coaches or facilitators. Other achievements that distinguish us: a community access program that gives public internet access to 10,000 rural towns and concentrated urban areas. And for a framework, and now I come to the Smart Communities program, it will provide benchmarks on best practices for community connectedness using information technology to increase the local economic, social, and cultural potential. Jim mentioned that I had the great pleasure to chair the panel on smart communities, which reported its recommendations last November to the Government of Canada. Central to that report was the panel's belief that smart communities is really an idea so potentially beneficial and transformative, that key word transformative, to our society, that it may reasonably be viewed as Canada's ultimate and most logical Millennium Plan. The connectedness agenda consists of 6 key pillars that will help drive this goal: Canada Online, smart communities, Canadian content online, electronic commerce, Canadian governments online, and connecting Canada to the world. Complementing the other 5 pillars, the Smart Community Initiative will use information and communication technologies to link people and organizations together, to share ideas, to address local development needs. The initiative intends to create at least one world-class smart community project in each province in the north and in an Aboriginal community by the year 2000. In today's competitive global economy, the key to success and prosperity rests in our ability to be innovative and to use information technology to our advantage. So Canada must push on with the Smart Communities Initiative to enhance our national framework for global competitiveness. Other countries and jurisdictions have latched onto the concept of smart communities. The European Union, for example, is funding programs in this area to enhance exports. The U.S. is pulling together a variety of initiatives. Japan and the Pacific Rim are starting to invest heavily, committing literally billions to the cause. Nonetheless, we believe Canada has the chance to seize the moment and to be the global leader. The smart communities we could launch in support of the connectedness agenda will shine round the world as Canadian examples of information technology leadership. What exactly is a smart community? Well, here's a definition. It can be defined as a community ranging from a neighborhood to a nationwide community of common or shared interest, whose members, organizations, and governing institutions are working in partnership to use information and communication technologies to transform their circumstances in significant ways. It sounds impressive, but for a relevant example, let's dial back to last week at Waterloo City Hall. Barely a week has passed since the launch of a smart community initiative with a fortuitous acronym, WIN, which stands for Waterloo Information Network. WIN is a smart open network infrastructure for the City of Waterloo that contains the essential elements of what I believe is a smart community. WIN has a smart database containing extensive information about businesses, individuals, government, and community organizations, including their location related to a community map. A set of services and tools to use the smart database in support of the infrastructure. A map-based system that displays a community map in a web browser. A searchable master index for every website in the city, and a World Wide Web providing the primary user interface and mechanism for delivering data to the user. These are typically applied to areas that include health medicine, environmental management, telework, telecommuting, education and learning, transportation, social services, law and public safety, housing, tourism, access to governments, community networks, resource sectors, and let's add, access to business, large and small, to round it out. What this all means is that the citizens of Waterloo will benefit from a powerful new information tool, a resource that will make their lives easier and better, such as the mother who wants to find the location of Lexington Park where her 8-year-old is scheduled to play soccer in 2 hours, or the parents who need to know what kind of school choices there are for their 8-year-old in the Forest Heights area, or the young entrepreneur who is looking for a list of suppliers so she can make the best sourcing agreements for her growing Waterloo business. And I would hope a family looking for a physician taking new patients and being able to access an up-to-date list of available doctors and their phone numbers. For what is the potential of smart communities to Canadians? Essentially, to improve the quality of their lives by giving greater access to services and information, by stimulating economic growth, by improving the quality and access to education for people of all ages and regions, by giving people a greater say in issues of governance, by collaborating with other levels of government and communities to the greater good of the country, by advancing the state of environmental awareness, monitoring and protection, and by attracting low-polluting, high-tech investment and businesses to their region. Individuals will reap rewards such as better paying, more satisfying jobs, higher standard of living, and faster, more personal service from their governments. And to come back to John Gardner's question, can we have equality of opportunity and excellence too? Yes, we can. Government of Canada has accepted the challenge to establish up to 12 demonstration smart communities to be in place by the year 2000. Funding was announced in the February 1999 budget of $60 million, up to $5 million per smart community, one per province, one in the north, one for Aboriginal communities across the country, plus a clearinghouse of information on smart communities, plus efforts to network those communities that are chosen as the first 12. So from 12 can come 24, can come 120, can come 1,200, can come 12,000, so that we develop smart communities right across this country from coast to coast to coast. So let's go back in time again for a minute, and then let me wrap up. A circle of high technology companies around the University of Waterloo, on which a large part of the new economy of Kitchener-Waterloo is based, is not something new in the 1990s. When the university was first imagined and dreamt about in the 1950s, the men, and they were all men then, who dreamed it, decided it was necessary and made it a reality with leaders of companies that were then in the forefront of Canadian technology: Dominion Rubber, BF Goodrich Canada, Arenda Engines, Electrohome, the Seagram Corporation. The links have always been close. Doug Wright likes to say, Doug, I, like so many others, have quoted you so often on this and so many other wise observations, that the most effective device for technology transfer is a pair of shoes, and wear them out. When this university came into existence, those shoes were almost certainly made in Kitchener by a company whose president served on the university's board of governors. I've been wearing a pair of Bauer skates for the last 15 years, and I want you to know they're very good skates, but if those wonderful people at Bauer could develop a new pair of legs to go with a new pair of skates, that really would be innovative. Kitchener-Waterloo people have always been industrious and inventive, able to reinvent themselves at critical times in history. Witness the amazing reinvention that emerged in the wake of the severe recession of the early 1900s, when many traditional manufacturing industries were lost to the community one by one. Seagrams, Labatt's, others closed their doors for good. These days, they have a golden asset in their midst: the University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University, Conestoga College, which I'm told is the best rated in the country in terms of its customer satisfactions, its student. I can think of no community in Canada of this size that is similarly blessed with strong educational resources in areas including information technology, business, and skills training. Now, we've also established many spin-off companies creating a dynamic export-based economy in this area, and representatives of that dynamism are here: Vertec, OpenTex, MKS, RAM, to name just a few. The community's network of insurance companies has expanded and strengthened, partly because of shrewd utilization of smart technology. We saw another example today with Arise. UW's economic impact in this region alone is estimated to exceed $340 million, but those are old and conservative figures going back to 1991. A better estimate is that the economic impact now exceeds $500 million. Spin-off companies are adding to the overall economic impact by several hundred millions. This is money that finds its way back into the community. On this date in history, Anne Boleyn, second wife of Henry VIII of England and mother of the princess who would become Queen Elizabeth I, was beheaded in the Tower of London. To escape a similar fate, I'll wrap up my talk now with one observation. When I think about this area, this city, I just remember that wonderful line about Henry VIII, something you often use when you're going on too long. He said, as Henry VIII said to one of his many wives, "Madam, I shall not keep you long." I think about unlimited growth, and to use that wonderful title from Dickens, Great Expectations. You're not only growing smart, but you're able to rebuild your downtown. Sorry, that should be uptown, the core area, to make it an attractive place to come to socialize, shop, and meet people. Once again, the University of Waterloo is playing a wonderful complementary role. Rick Haldenby, the director of UW School of Architecture, has mobilized his team of budding architects and designers, backed by planners and environmental experts and geographers, to create design ideas for all the public spaces in the uptown. He says that some of his students this term are from many points of the globe, including Italy, Mexico, the UK, and Germany, and they have their own visions of great cities and meeting places. I want to return to where I started, that observation from St. Augustine's City of God. If you wish to judge the quality of a city, look to see what it cherishes. And let me leave you with that statement that comes from the 20th century that I think could aptly summarize this enterprise that we as a community are about. And it goes this way: some people see things as they are and wonder why. I dream of things that ought to be and ask, why not? Thank you.
I was very interested in your comments on history, and it seems very appropriate that you spoke of the railroad that connected Canadians together, Trans-Canada Highway, next year the Trans-Canada Trail, and we know Canadians love to talk. We love the telephone, so communication comes very natural to us. And it's connecting Canadians to each other and to the world that is critical to the success of our nation as a people collectively become more and more involved in the information society. I loved your term A. It's very appropriate. I'll have to remember that. EH. It is important to our community, the region, the CTT area. We come together to provide the means for people, businesses, and organizations to easily connect to each other and to sources of accurate and timely information. We have taken the steps toward this goal in Waterloo through the continuing development and deployment of WIN, Waterloo Information Center. It's now accessed to the City of Waterloo website, and we envision, as we work the kinks out of this, that it's rolled out not only through the City of Waterloo, but the region, the CTT area, and why not think big, the world. We look forward to all those opportunities presented to strengthen and solidify existing relationships and to forward new and exciting partnerships within our community, our province, and our nation. And David, you've truly inspired us to seek to be a truly smart community. David, it's my pleasure to take this opportunity to welcome you and your family, not only to U of W and our community of higher learning, WLU, U of W, and Conestoga College, but also with all our open hearts to the City of Waterloo. Thank you very, very much. That was a most inspiring speech. Thank you. A little something.
Wow, that's even a harder act to follow. Joan, thank you very much. On a personal note, David, I want to tell you that I also wear Bauer skates, and I'm looking forward to lacing up beside you this winter. I'm going to try and get him on my team. I hear he's really good. I also want to say a final word on behalf of Jim Downey, who has, this is probably the final Communitech meeting that Jim will be at. Maybe you'll be at others as a guest. I hope you'll come back, but I want to thank you very much, Jim, for all of the support you have provided the technology industry, myself personally, and on behalf of the CTT. All the best, and thank you very much. These programs take a lot of work, and just a quick thank you to three very, very hardworking people: Chris O'Brien, Laurie Ridgway, and Bonnie Oberle of the University of Waterloo, who in the background put all this work together, and thank you much. How about a hand for that hardworking crew? Communitech and CTAN are on the move. We're moving across the street to 175. There's a little notice, and so come on and drop by and visit us. Also, an important event in our programs is the golf tournament. It's filling up quickly, June 24th. It's a lot of fun. We have registration forms, and there's a meeting of the golf committee afterwards, so folks stick around. That's it. Safe trip. Thank you for everybody, especially our Toronto and out-of-town visitors who have come in. I'm sure you weren't disappointed. It was a wonderful presentation. Welcome to the community, and have a safe trip back. Thank you, everybody.